'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I'm at the park again. It's a little wet today here at the park. It rained earlier today. I was supposed to be up in Howard City playing flowers for Memorial Day weekend, but my father and I had a discussion and we decided, okay, we're going to skip this year. Normally there's a luncheon that we go to, and Dad was like, yeah, I don't want to go out, be wet. And as it is, next weekend, chances are we will be going to my dad's aunt's funeral, who passed away recently. I told you the story. You know, she was a hardcore racist, and, you know, she was just one of those people who, you know, I really don't want to go to the funeral, but, you know, maybe I'll find a way not to go there. Why should I honor the memory of somebody who helped to kind of ruin my life by having a son who basically ordered my, you know, pushed my parents into moving up north. And it's like I talk about how my cousins all had happy lives growing up. They had friends and they got to do things, and here I am, you know, in the middle of nowhere, being bullied a lot and not having a lot of friends and just being an outcast. And my dad was always pushing me to go out and make friends. He got angry that the kids in the neighborhood kind of bullied me, and it's like, you know, it was their fault, not mine. You know, that was the way my mom and my dad was growing up. And, you know, even worse was the fact that, yeah, I can go on and on, but it's like, you know, this woman, unfortunately, you know, she was a racist, and so was her husband, and a lot of people in northern Michigan are on the wrong side of history. I mean, this is why, you know, I get so angry thinking about my childhood. But I need to move on and start talking about other things. But, well, maybe I'll get mandated to work next weekend. Who knows? I could use the overtime because we've been really slow the last couple of weeks. So, let's get back. The joys of being over the airport. Okay. So I want to talk about my, so when I started this website, it was originally called Bring Howard Stern to Northern Michigan Radio and TV back in 1999. Then it became Chuck69.com, and it became, you know, less about Howard Stern and more about life, I guess. And, you know, I started this site because I was angry that I lived in northern Michigan, and I was an outcast, like I said. The one thing that kind of kept me going in life was music. I was a hard rock and heavy metal guy, but none of the radio stations in northern Michigan thought about me. And, you know, and this is why I was so happy to go to Sirius, you know, when Sirius XM came around and Howard Stern signed on with them. I instantly got a radio and a subscription, and, you know, I never listened to local radio here in Grand Rapids. And what's funny is that Traverse City now has an active rock station in Rock 105 and 955, and they do play a lot of the stuff that KLT thumbed its nose on in the past. And what's funny now is that KLT actually has a Friday night metal show now, and it does very well. And yet what's funny is Rock 105 955, you know, Cartman, you know, is the programming director. He's a big fat emo kid. He puts on this stupid emo show on Saturday nights, and it's like, okay, you're an active rock station, not really alternative, you know. I mean, I think on Saturday nights people deserve a medal show, and not. And it's like these people don't know how to compete against KLT anymore. And it is what it is. These people just don't give a flying fuck about, their listeners and the ratings show. I mean, Rock 105.955's ratings have gone way down, ever since Smitty left the station. And they didn't want to give him a livable wage. He said that he never made over $40,000 up north in radio. And what's funny is that, in northern Michigan, if you make $40,000 a year, you're not doing well at all. I'm sorry to say that, because everything's too expensive up north. Yeah, and that's another reason why I kind of like Grand Rapids. I mean, in a way, I'm happier here in Grand Rapids than I ever was in northern Michigan, because, yes, there is diversity, but, there's also a lot of assholes, and I've lived in towns big and small. I mean, I've really lived in just 2 towns in my life, Grand Rapids and northern Michigan, and I've learned how to look at the good and bad of everything. But the real truth is, companies just simply need to start thinking about their workers instead of making excuses and lies. And, because I haven't had a raise in a couple of years myself, and I would love to, and it's like this month alone I've had to pay a lot of extra bills. I'm probably going to have to take some money from my father, as it is today. Speaking of Dad, he's going to have me go to the store today and buy him clothes. He can't stand for a long period of time due to his surgery that he had a few years ago. So, but getting back to the meat, one of the things that I like to talk about is how bad the broadcasting industry has become. I wanted to be a DJ growing up. I wanted to be influential in what people listen to. I wanted to be, bring some adventure to the world of radio. And unfortunately, that was not meant to be, because over the years, thanks to the FCC becoming less about what consumers want and all about what people want now, with the corporations, I should say, to put it quite unfortunately. Look, folks, look at what happened with Matt Hanlon. Some of you may remember that name, Matt Hanlon. He was the guy who came to Grand Rapids about 25 years ago, and he started to run this once great station, WKLQ, the Rock at 94.5, into the ground. KLQ, one time at a concert, Guns N' Roses lead singer Axl Rose said that Q95 in Indianapolis saved his life, because he lived in a small town in northern Indiana, and it was the part of Indiana where brothers and sisters sleep with each other and the next of kin. And it was kind of like where I grew up too. There were a lot of inbred losers up there too. KLQ saved my life, and that station kept me happy because it spoke my language. And then what happened was Hanlon made a bad decision. You see, Hanlon was not a broadcaster. He was a bean counter. And when Hanlon took over KLQ, he made a very foolish decision. He demoted Howard Stern to WBBL 1340, and it was there he made the decision to put Stern on there. And what happened was he was telling the media, we did this because we just signed huge Bill Simonson to a $60,000 deal, and the station needed more income, and they pimped the show Bill Simonson the huge show a lot. They were selling clothes at Meijer. There was even a huge show, TV show, I think it was on WXSP. I mean, Bill was everywhere a long time ago. And unfortunately, he was an asshole. This is a guy who, I mean, hell, he even made fun of me years ago for the fact that I'm a loner and a loser, because years ago I was soliciting dates on my website. But, Bill needed to realize that he, doesn't do a good job of walking in another person's shoes, and to prove that he's, furthermore, this is a guy who cost his station $400,000 when he lived in Texas because he made a very frivolous comment about a woman who was like a regular on the show. Yeah, he said something to the tune of, this is a woman who goes to parties topless and, she's sexually active. And yet this woman was the type of woman who would taught Sunday school. And so Bill could not provide the receipts, and he ended up being sued and lost his job at this station, KJFK, in Austin, Texas. Yeah, KJFK, by the way, was also a Stern affiliate. But anyway, back to Hanlon. Folks, I know the real reason why Hanlon got rid of Stern. Hanlon was a hobnobber to the DeVos family and the Grand Rapids elite. The Meijer family, the DeVos family, these people. And they all hate Howard Stern. They are all Dutch reformists. And what's even more depressing about Meijer is, I think I mentioned this before, that Hendrik Meijer, the founder of Meijer, he was originally from the Netherlands, and yet he moved to America because he was a progressive. He was actually he was on the same side as like Bernie Sanders politically, and FDR. He was a true person of democracy. And the reason why was because he worked at factories in the Netherlands, and they all, unfortunately, all these factories were killing people. Anyway, that's why he moved to America. And unfortunately, he settled in Holland originally. Holland, Michigan, I should say, not Holland as in the Netherlands. He ended up having to move to Greenville because his politics clashed with the people of Holland. They were a bunch of right-wing losers who all said that if you work in a factory, you deserve to be crushed to death. Yeah, that was pretty much their attitude. Anyway, so Hendrik Meijer, that's why he started a little barbershop, which eventually became the first Meijer thrift market. He bought up a bunch of grocery goods from the Lee and Katie warehouse here in Grand Rapids and went to work. And he was a hard worker, He did a good job providing for his family. But you see, folks, the tragic truth is, when you're a billionaire, you don't care about the small guy. You do not care about what they want. And that's what Hanlon was doing. He was living in a really nice house in Ada, providing for his family, and meanwhile he was going around fucking up KLQ, turning that station from a top 5 rock station into a station that was lucky to have a 2 or 3 share. And word had it that he was about ready to, he was out there to get Rick Scott and Darla from GRD. Of course, Rick Beckett, he had major drug and health issues. He had severe diabetes. And he ended up dying of. Yeah, I remember he was only 54 when he died. Yeah, he was a. Yeah, at least he did lose a lot of weight. Yeah, his last radio gig, by the way, was with Wood AM here in town, Wood 1300. Yeah, him and Scott Winters. But yeah, the rumor was that Hanlon was going to get Rick, Scott, and Darla from GRD, but they said no because they worked there once before, never again. And what happened was Rick, Scott, and Darla were actually fired from GRD because, excuse me. Well, the story was they got fired from GRD because of Rick's drinking problem. And he was a no-call, no-show too many times. So they were like, yeah, let's go ahead and get fired. But that's what Hanlon wanted. He wanted Rick, Scott, and Darla. And he couldn't get them. So he had to sell with Ron and Don and all these failed, crappy Howard Stern wannabe morning shows for years and years. So that's what Hanlon did. A lot of DJs were either getting fired or quitting, or they all quit. Hanlon did not care about the audience. I think he was intentionally killing KLQ because he wanted to make the DeVos family happy. And that's what happened. And of course, the only good thing that Hanlon did do, in my opinion, was at least when Stern got canceled in Grand Rapids, finally, it wasn't his fault. It was because of Citadel Corporate. They ordered Stern off all their stations because Howard was talking too much about his impending move to Sirius XM. And it pissed them off. Howard was using his show to sell satellite radio units. And I'm like, okay, if you want to fight fire with fire, you've lost. Because that's who Hanlon was. And the rest of Citadel. But guess what happened? Karma reamed them hard in the ass. So this is what happened. So this is what happened to Hanlon. So Citadel Broadcasting was now a penny stock. And they... Yeah, I'm talking to my dog here. I'm trying to avoid being around people when I do these podcasts for obvious reasons. And so the rest of the story was Hanlon decided... Come on. Hanlon decided that after he got fired, that he would go to Town Square Broadcasting. He went to Town Square Media. He became an ad salesman there because, sales was his forte. And guess what? He got fired. Not because of the lack of sales. That was not true. Hanlon got fired because this is what he did. He drove, so he was out one day driving his Range Rover, drunk. He was right in front of the old movie theater on the Beltline, Celebration Cinema, and he got T-boned. Went in front, did a Michigan U-turn, got T-boned by a elderly Indian couple. Thankfully, this couple survived. The only thing that got killed that day was Hanlon's career. And so anyway, Hanlon got fired. His mugshot was seen all over the place. I laugh. I smile every time I see that photo of him. I mean, once upon a time, he was the darling of Grand Rapids radio, and now he's a fucking has-been. Good riddance. Yeah, Grand Rapids Press even gave him, like, the Hero of the Year award because he, the Tigers were on 6:40 a.m. WMFN. And of course Tyrone Bynum was running that station into the ground too. So when their contract expired, he took that station and he took the Tigers and put them back on WLAV. Yeah, and of course then they moved over to iHeartMedia. Now they're on 98.7 here in town. They're on Town Square Station. Anyway, so Matt Hanlon was now banished from Grand Rapids Radio. He did, however, have one more radio job, and it was for Radio 1 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Radio 1 is a black-owned company. And honestly, I do not like Radio 1, or their current name, which is Urban 1. Yeah, they go by Urban 1 now because they have a TV network. And they're the company that has the Cosby Show on their cable network. And I'm like, Bill Cosby. And it's like, okay, I've said this once and I'll say it again. In England, when it was discovered that Jimmy Savile was molesting children, the BBC cut all ties with him. But Bill Cosby, well, he was found guilty of drugging and sexually assaulting women. He was a wealthy, powerful man. And he ended up, his career's toast. Good riddance to him. It's too bad that he only went to jail for a few years. I hope if there is a hell, he'll rot in there. And yet, Urban 1, they're doing business with that asshole. And what I have to say is, I have nothing but respect for the victims. I'm sorry. Cosby has always been a big pile of crap. Anyway, so back to Hanlon for a second. So Matt Hanlon ended up on excuse me. So Matt Hanlon, he left I don't know if he left Radio 1 or Urban 1, excuse me. I don't know if he left or if he went to or if he got fired or what, but he's no longer in radio. He's actually now, I heard he works for a financial services company that's actually owned by his brother. So, and last time I Googled the name Hanlon Financial Services or whatever they're called, they got a lot of bad reviews. So, you see, folks, the reason why I'm telling you the story of Matt Hanlon is because CBS is pulling the same shit now. And, folks, you think about some of the greatest broadcasters of all time: Walter Cronkite, Paul Harvey, Howard Stern, Casey Kasem, Rick Dees, Shadoe Stevens. Shadoe Stevens, no joke, actually built a radio station at his house when he was just 10 years old. And look at what it brought him. He proved, his small town in North Dakota where he lived had no rock and roll radio station growing up. And according to Shadoe, he actually said that when he signed that station, when word got out that he had built a radio station at his house, young girls were coming over with stacks of records. They loved this kid. And it even got him a job as an actual DJ. His uncle owned a radio station in town. But These people were real broadcasters. But David Ellison is not a broadcaster. He is another numbers guy who cares more about profit, who puts profit over people. And look at what's happened. Look at what he's done to CBS. The CBS Evening News has no ratings. It's like it's turned into a public access newscast, especially when their cameraman, you hear about this, their cameraman collapsed on the air. So they actually had to end the show early as a result. And look at what happened on Thursday, the last episode of The Late Show. 33 years. It started with David Letterman, and then Stephen Colbert took over. And Colbert took his viewers with him from the Colbert Report on Comedy Central. And he slayed in the ratings. He was number one across the board on the late night ratings charts. He was, and CBS lied and said, well, his ratings sucked. And we were paying him too much money. It was too expensive. He was number one in the ratings. And we all know the real reason why they let him go. There's always the real reason and the corporate reason why anybody gets fired. Corporate reason, well, I told you what it was. Colbert's rating, they said that the ratings were bad and the show was too expensive to produce. Here's the real reason. The Ellisons are Trump supporters. And they had to get FCC approval to get the show, for CBS and Paramount to merge with Skydance, the Ellison's company. Bless you. I don't know if that was a sneeze or a cough. My dog, bear in mind she's 13. You see, folks, and it's led, and that's what Donald Trump wants. He is a man with no fucking sense of humor. For decades, Johnny Carson made fun of the president. Jay Leno, David Letterman. It didn't matter who was in office. Conan O'Brien. David Letterman used to do a nightly sketch called Great Moments in Presidential Speeches. I loved it. It usually started with FDR saying, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself." Then it was JFK, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." And then it ended with George W. Bush acting all stupid, mumbling, and oh my God. Yeah, right. Yeah, of course, one of them was the infamous OBGYN. Oh my God, I remember what happened. He was saying that these people practice their love with their patients. Oh my God. Oh my God. But folks, it's customary for any talk show host to bash the president. It's been going on for generations. But Donald Trump, oh no, you can't make fun of Donald because he's a very sensitive prick. But when he goes online, but yet, when somebody like, but if a famous celebrity who doesn't agree with his political views passes away for whatever reason, it's Trump derangement syndrome. And it's sickening what kind of humor he has. He loves bashing the American people. He puts up these stupid AI videos of planes flying overhead people with feces, bombing them with feces. And it's like he'll cry that, well, but yet he will stand there and cry that he won by a landslide, which, not true. He did not win by a landslide. But now corporate media is kissing his ass. And why are they kissing his ass? It's because they're getting a big tax break. And that's who the Ellisons are. They are running and CBS has lost, the CBS Evening News for years has struggled in the ratings. I mean, they've struggled in the ratings probably since the final days of Dan Rather. And unfortunately, when the Redstones owned CBS, when they were running the show, they still had bad ratings. But guess what happened? The Ellisons have made it worse. And Tony DeCopel is their puppet. And nobody's watching. That show's ratings are in the shitter. And deservingly so. And, of course, they censored a report that was supposed to air on 60 Minutes about that jail in South America that was supposed to lodge people who were stopped by ICE. That's what it is. They don't care about you. It's about how much money they'll make from Trump and his tax breaks for the wealthy. And of course, we all knew what happened on Friday night, last night, 11:30 p.m. CBS News had its final broadcast. CBS Radio News had its final broadcast, and the final words ever said were good night and good luck. What a tragedy, folks. CBS is out of the news business. Of course, they sold off all their radio stations a number of years ago. Now they're owned by a firm called Odyssey, which used to be Intercom Communications. Intercom, of course, the company changed its name from Intercom to Odyssey, Audcity, Odyssey. And the big reason why they changed their name was because Intercom now had some bad juju attached to it. Some of you may remember there was a tragic news story regarding one of their stations in Sacramento called The End, 107.9 The End. It was a top 40 station. So The End had the stupid contest called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. And they had a group of people, Nintendo Wii. And the story was they had to drink obscene amounts of water. And the last person to go pee would win the Nintendo Wii. Well, what happened was there was a woman who drank so much water. She was a single mother, by the way. Had an 8-year-old son. She drank so much water that killed her. And so what happened was the station... So, the station did fire the morning show. But, the station's ratings were still phenomenal. So this is what happened. When they were merging with CBS... the FCC had the station under their microscope. So this is what happened. They ended up just simply shutting the station. They ended up just shutting the station down and just moving the end to another frequency, 106.5. And that was all they did. It was like, that, to me, it was a very bad decision. But I mean, it really shows how corporate and and idiotic radio stations can be. Anyway, so now the company is called Odyssey. And believe it or not, one of the lead investors of this company is what a lot of conservatives love to call the poster child of of the left, and that man, of course, is George Soros. George Soros is a he is a billionaire, but not a mega billionaire like like the Ellisons are, or what's that guy from the guy who ruined Twitter. I'm forgetting names today, god damn it. Elon Musk. There we go. I mean, these people, Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, these people are mega billionaires. And they all love to say, George Soros this, George Soros that. George Soros is evil. He's only worth $10 billion, folks. I mean, George Soros is in the poorhouse comparing to all these people. Anyway, all I can say, folks, is, but anyway, George Soros is one of Odyssey's lead investors. And some people do say that he is really making the company too liberal. But I'm like, if George Soros owns Odyssey now, I hope that he makes all the right decisions. So this is what happened. So all these stations are owned by were once owned by CBS. Now they're owned by Odyssey. And these stations include KNX Los Angeles, WBBM Chicago, WCCO Minneapolis, WWJ Detroit. These stations were longtime members of CBS Radio. And now, so this is what happened. They all made the flip to ABC. And I'll be quite honest with you, of all the top of the hour news sources out there, I think ABC is now the lesser of the evils. And I'll explain to you why. Of all the major networks, the four major networks, ABC is probably the lesser of the evils, because NBC is owned by Comcast. Comcast is a big donor to Trump. Of course, we told you about CBS. We don't need to talk about Fox and the Murdoch family. They're all a bunch of wealthy pricks. They they kiss Trump's ass. So here's the story with ABC. We all knew what happened to ABC and Jimmy Kimmel. They bowed to Trump once, and they learned the hard way why they don't bow to Trump. When they suspended Jimmy Kimmel, people actually stood up. They canceled their Disney vacations. They canceled their subscriptions to Disney Plus. They stood up. And guess what? And guess who lost in the end? Disney. Disney lost over $1 billion of stock value. So at the end of the week, ABC had made the announcement. We're going to bring back Jimmy Kimmel. But there were two station groups that said, nope, we're going to not bring Jimmy back. And the reason is because of what he said about our little golden child, who, of course, was Charlie Kirk. Oh, he made fun of his death. No, he did not. He did not make fun of Charlie Kirk's death. He made fun of the fact that Donald Trump and the MAGA cult all decided to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and say that, we're going to stand up and cry that, we're going to go out and cry that, it was the left's fault. No, it wasn't. It was not the left's fault that Charlie died. It was Charlie Kirk who killed Charlie Kirk because he was a vicious, vile piece of shit. Period. Full stop. And the man who killed Charlie Kirk was himself a right-wing conservative. He grew up in a mega cult family in Utah. Anyway, so folks, ABC learned the hard way. You don't bow to Trump. And they brought back Kimmel, and they negotiated with the state, Nexstar. Nexstar owns Channel 41 in Bell Creek, which is ABC down there. They of course, were supposed to merge with Tegna, which owns Channel 13. Of course, Nexstar also owns Wood TV8, which is NBC here in town. So what happened was, the merger was approved by the FCC, but a judge struck it down. Of course, that's part of probably the reason why, if you watch Channel 8 News and Brian Sterling is doing the show by himself, that's probably the reason why they were supposed to shut down 13 in their news department and move Julia Dragos over there. Of course, Julia is probably close to retirement too. Of course, Anyway. So apparently the negotiation went like this. ABC allegedly, according to sources, told Nexstar and Sinclair, like I said, they're a very mega friendly company. So this is what happened. They went out and told these stations that if you don't bring back Jimmy Kimmel, we're going to cut your feeds to air Monday Night Football and any sporting event that ABC has. And guess what happened? The networks, the stations the companies put up their white flags. They said, okay, we surrender. We will air Kimmel, even though we hate the guy. So that's what happened. And I think because of all this, just my opinion, is why Odyssey, when CBS Radio announced that they were going out of business, they went with ABC instead. ABC has more integrity than NBC and definitely more integrity than Fox. Of course, 590 in Kalamazoo. Here's the funny thing. WKZO recently, not in the last year or so, picked up Paul Harvey's rest of the story. I guess Paul Harvey's estate still owns the rights to that show. So they've been syndicating the best of the rest of the story to individual stations, and WKZO is one of those stations. But here's the story. Paul Harvey, by the way, worked at one of the first stations he ever worked at was WKZO. Way back in, I want to say, 1940s. It was one of the stations he worked at before he hit the big time in radio. Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey, and this is the rest of the story. So anyway, what happened was, but it would have been natural for them to join ABC, in my opinion. But nope, they went with Fox. So Wood, here in Grand Rapids, Wood 1300 and 106.9, WTKG 1230, which is another station that John Fetzer once owned, and now 590 WKZO are Fox affiliates. And I'm like, okay, if I am on the road and I want to listen to top of the hour news from a reliable news source, I'm fucked. Unless, of course, thankfully, WBBM Chicago, 780 AM, they actually have a kick-ass signal here in Grand Rapids. Yeah, they're a little fuzzy, but hey, 50,000 watt during the day, full time, hey, that's good enough for me. So I'll listen to that. But what's bothersome too is that I-1430 WION in Ionia and their former sister station, 106 M106.3 WGLM in Lakeview. They were both owned by the same company, but they split in half. And not too long ago, of course, my good friend Darren Gibson works at WGLM, and we talk from time to time about the fact that both stations get their top of the hour news updates now from Salem. And I'm like, Salem is another rotten source for news. They're a very corrupt company. They were the company that gave us that horrible movie 2000 Mules. And they actually had to disown the film because they were successfully sued by some of the people who got blurred out in the film because they were actually voting for Donald Trump, and they were said, and Dinesh D'Souza and his little cult of friends, and I think Charlie Kirk was one of them, because he had a show on Salem radio, that, these people all voted for Biden. They're cult. We're voting for dead people. No. And now they want to make it illegal. They wanted to make it illegal for anybody to vote by mail. Bullshit. You gotta have ID. Okay. Sorry, but not sorry. But I'd rather vote at home than to stand in line for hours before I can get to a poll. Okay? But you see, folks, that's why I think Odyssey went with ABC Radio for the top of the hour news. Because ABC probably has more credibility than any of the other networks left. Because they kissed Trump's ass once before, and they learned that was a bad idea. And, like I said earlier about Matt Hanlon, he kissed the wrong ass, and look at what happened to him. And it's the same with not just broadcasters, but other people. You kiss the wrong ass, folks, and you're going to pay. You should not sacrifice quality and tell your listeners to be force-fed into shit. Okay? I mean, money talks, folks. Money talks. If you trade in a good quality product with integrity and then switch it for shit, you will pay the price, whether you like it or not. And that is what CBS is going through now. CBS and Paramount. And by the way, Jimmy Kimmel has even told his viewers, if you have a Paramount Plus subscription right now, cancel it. Don't do business with these assholes. They deserve to be punished for what they did to Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert did not deserve to be punished for being number one in the ratings. But it happens a lot. I remember a lot of radio stations that were near or at number one in the ratings. Boom, they change formats, and boom, all the listeners go away. Up where I grew up in northern Michigan, 106.7 The Peak. They had very good ratings, and then they flipped to adult contemporary. All the listeners went away. And the company that, it was owned by the same idiots who own KLT, the Goki family. And they said, well, it was an easier sell because we don't want to advertise, we don't want to be a little kid station anymore. Well, guess what happened? This is why people go to satellite radio and streaming. And they don't know where the hole in their ass is. They don't know how to compete, folks. They think they're doing the right thing by listening to their consultants and listening to the wrong people instead of the actual listener. And when the ratings come up and they're, and they are the lowest rated station in town, they don't know why they're that low. Because they stopped listening to us, folks. Hanlon didn't listen to me. Let me tell you about the only person I knew who actually liked Opie and Anthony in Grand Rapids. It was a coworker of mine. He had really severe ADHD. We all called him Tater Tot because he was stupid. He had bad hygiene. As a matter of fact, every time I had to go pee, he would follow me into the bathroom and take a massive shit, and it would stink up the whole bathroom. And while he was doing so, he was talking to me. It's like, dude, I don't want to smell what comes out of your fucking ass. And then he would go to me and say, hey, did you hear on Opie and Anthony the blah, 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 blah. Oh, do you know the sound effect that they use for blah, blah, blah? Okay. Newsflash, Opie and Anthony suck. And Anthony has proved to the world that he is a fucking asshole. Anthony Cumia. Fucking wife beater. This asshole beat up his girlfriend and was caught on video punching her in the face. And not only that, Opie and Anthony didn't even like each other. They couldn't even stand each other. That's why they broke up. I was so happy when their show was taken off the air. And of course, the reason why was because because Anthony got his ass kicked by a black woman. And he was using racial slurs against her. Yeah, what a fucking ass. I am so happy that they broke up. And the truth came out that they didn't even like each other. Yeah. And yeah, so much for all these douchebags going, hoo-hoo. How? Oh, I don't like hoo-hoo. They don't want Opie and Anthony to be themselves. Yeah, because they were ripping off everything that Howard was doing. They got what they deserved, folks. And so did Matt Hanlon. But anyway, I'll say it once and I'll say it again. It's not just the media, folks. We have a right to bitch about companies that do us wrong. And if you own a company, look at what happened to Roy Henderson up in Traverse City. I talked about how bad his company was for the fact that, they were, paychecks were bouncing and he was treating his people like shit. He wanted to sell that property he bought in downtown Traverse City for $5 million. And, he had to sell for $2 million. And you know what he did? He threatened to sue me because I told the fucking truth about him instead of doing the right thing and doing shit right for once. If you abuse your employees, if you throw shit at them, and of course like I said recently, Roy got, let's remember something. Roy was sued for $25,000 by a former employee of his, Dan Stevens. Dan recently revealed that Roy was stealing his child support payments and tax payments from his paycheck, and it was Dan who was thrown in jail, not Roy. And the only reason why Dan Stevens, not Dan Stevens, but Roy Henderson, the reason why he went after me was because Roy, it was because there was an asshole who was dead set against me, who tried to do some business with the guy. And he tried to sweeten the deal by saying, "Oh, this is what Chuck said about you on his website." Yeah, Bob, how does, yeah, oh, Chuck is a $8 an hour loser who lives in a crappy apartment. Okay, Bob, how does it feel to have your wife leave you, to be asshole deep in debt, and then having, when your wife leaves you, you end up living in a crappy apartment, not in a crappy apartment, but actually in a rusty old trailer park? Yeah, you're not winning, dude. And you don't have room to talk when shit like that happens. Ugh, Jesus fucking H. Christ. But you see, folks, all I can say is it happened, it happened in the past, and it's going to happen now with CBS. The once Tiffany Network has now turned into something much, expired White Castle. Who wants that? And, it's a shell of its former self. And I hope that people are getting the message. Nobody likes Donald Trump. I mean, hell, this is part of the reason why my dad and I are not going to Howard City this weekend. Right now I'm actually in the parking lot of the park that I took my dog to. She's actually on the floor taking a little snooze. That's why if you hear some distant snoring, well, that's her. So that's all I have to say. Yeah, I mean, we're saving money by not getting gas, not filling up the vehicle, and, for right now. And I hope that, we will have a blue tsunami come this upcoming fall. This is going to be, and of course, like I said, I'm very happy that Mayor Duggan got out of the race. Jocelyn Benson is hell-bent on winning, and I will vote for her. I hope that she will succeed, and we will, as American people, as the great state of Michigan, will vote for her and give that message to Donald Trump. The days of MAGA are coming to an end. We're not saving money. We're not winning. But we will, because one voice is one vote. Yes, we gave, and the Democrats, most importantly of all, need to wake up. Stop being corporate shills and start caring about your people. And that's why, my friends, that is why that's why, folks, all these corporations need to wake up. And CBS is definitely that company. Good day and good luck, everyone. I'll talk to you later.